The day they sentenced us to the void was the day humanity made its biggest mistake. Commander Sarachin watched through the reinforced viewport as Earth's blue marble shrank to nothing, swallowed by the hungry darkness that surrounded their prison ship. The Black Hole Station, that's what they called it, was supposed to be our tomb, a place where rebels and dreamers went to disappear forever. 150 souls, branded as traitors for daring to question the corporate council's iron grip on the colonies. They thought the crushing gravity and endless night would break us, make us beg for mercy that would never come. But they didn't understand what happens when you take people who've already lost everything and give them nothing left to lose. 3 months into our exile, as we watched the stars twist and bend around the event horizon, something incredible happened. The black hole wasn't our destroyer, it became our teacher. Its warped space-time revealed secrets the corporate council had hidden for decades, energy patterns that could revolutionize everything. While they thought we were dying in the dark, we were building something that would shake the very foundations of their empire. They threw us into a black hole, but we were about to make it our throne. The transport ship Perdition had no windows in the prisoner hold, but Sarachin could feel the moment they crossed into the black hole's influence. Her stomach lurched as gravity shifted, and the constant hum of the engines changed pitch. Around her, 149 other prisoners sat in magnetic restraints, their faces pale in the harsh white light of the holding bay. "Attention, traitors," came the voice of Captain Morrison over the intercom. His tone dripped with satisfaction. "Welcome to your new home. The Charybdis station orbits exactly 100 kilometers from the event horizon of designation XK739, what the scientists call a stellar mass black hole. The gravitational forces here are so intense that time moves differently. 1 day here equals 3 days back on Earth. You'll age slower, but don't get excited, you'll have plenty of time to think about your crimes against the corporate council." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. She'd been a commander in the Colonial Defense Force for 15 years before she'd made the mistake of asking too many questions. Questions about why the outer colonies were starving while Earth's elite lived in luxury. Questions about the mysterious energy signatures the Council's ships had been harvesting from black hole regions for the past decade. Questions that had earned her a one-way ticket to the worst prison in human space. The ship shuddered as docking clamps engaged. Through the hull, Sarah could hear the mechanical whining of airlocks cycling. Then the magnetic restraints released with a collective click. "Move," shouted Guard Sergeant Willis, gesturing with his shock rifle. "Single file. Any trouble and you'll get a taste of voltage that'll scramble your brain." Sarah stood slowly, her legs shaky from the 3-week journey in restraints. The woman next to her, Dr. Elena Vasquez, if she remembered correctly from the trial broadcasts, stumbled and nearly fell. Sarah caught her arm. "Thanks," Elena whispered. She was young, maybe 30, with short black hair and eyes that seemed too old for her face. Sarah remembered her case, a quantum physicist who discovered something about black hole energy extraction that the Council didn't want public. "Stay close," Sarah murmured back. "We need to stick together if we're going to survive this." The prisoners shuffled through a series of airlocks and corridors that looked more like a military installation than a prison. The walls were thick titanium steel composite, designed to withstand the intense radiation and gravitational stresses of their location. Emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow. They emerged into a vast central chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The ceiling was a massive transparent dome, and through it, she could see something that defied every instinct her brain had about how the universe should look. Stars stretched into long, glowing streamers as their light was bent by the black hole's gravity. Space itself seemed to twist and spiral, creating patterns of light and shadow that hurt to look at directly. And there, taking up a quarter of the dome's view, was the black hole itself. Not the simple black circle she'd expected, but a swirling disk of superheated matter spiraling inward, glowing white-hot at the edges and fading to deep orange as it approached the event horizon. It was beautiful and terrifying, a cosmic whirlpool that could tear apart planets. "Welcome to Charybdis Station," said a new voice. Sarah turned to see a tall, thin man in a black uniform approaching them. His name tag read Warden Kruger. His smile was cold as vacuum. "I'm sure you're all wondering about the accommodations. Let me be clear, this is not a rehabilitation facility. This is a place where the corporate council sends problems that need to disappear. The gravitational fields here prevent any ship from approaching without our authorization codes. The radiation will kill you in minutes without proper shielding. And even if you somehow manage to escape, where would you go? The nearest inhabited system is 47 light-years away. He gestured toward the dome. That monster out there warps space and time itself. Sometimes we get supply ships from Earth, but due to time dilation, they only come every few months from our perspective. You have been forgotten by the universe, and the universe has forgotten you. Sarah felt the despair radiating from the other prisoners, but something else stirred in her chest. Anger. These corporate bastards thought they could just throw people away, hide them in the darkest corner of space where no one would ever find them. But Sarah had spent her career fighting impossible odds, and she'd learned something important. Impossible just meant no one had figured out how to do it yet. The prisoners were divided into groups and led to different sections of the station. Sarah found herself assigned to Block C, Level 7, along with Elena and about 20 others. Their cell was actually a dormitory with bunk beds, basic sanitation facilities, and a small common area. The walls were the same titanium steel as the corridors, but someone had scratched names and dates into the metal, evidence of previous prisoners who'd passed through. "How long do you think we'll be here?" asked a young man named Marcus. He'd been convicted of sabotaging corporate mining equipment on Titan. "Forever," said an older prisoner named Thompson, who'd been on the station for 6 months already. "Face it, kid. This is where we die." Sarah sat on her assigned bunk and studied the faces around her. Despair, fear, resignation, exactly what the council wanted. But she also saw something else in a few faces, especially Elena's. Curiosity. The same kind of scientific hunger that had gotten them all in trouble in the first place. "Thompson," Sarah said quietly. "What exactly do we do here? What's our daily routine?" The older man shrugged. "Work shifts maintaining the station. The life support systems need constant attention because of the radiation. The gravitational sensors require daily calibration. The power grid has to be monitored around the clock. They keep us busy enough that we don't have time to think about escape." "Who runs the technical systems?" "Mostly automated, but prisoners do the grunt work." "Why?" Sarah lay back on her bunk and stared at the ceiling. "Just curious." But she was more than curious. She was starting to plan. The next morning, the morning was an arbitrary concept in a place where the only light came from a black hole's accretion disk. Sarah volunteered for every work assignment available. She swept corridors, cleaned air filters, and helped with routine maintenance. More importantly, she watched and learned. Charybdis Station was more sophisticated than she'd initially realized. The gravitational sensors weren't just for monitoring their position relative to the black hole, they were studying it. Banks of quantum computers processed massive amounts of data about spacetime distortion, energy fluctuations, and something called temporal variance fields. During her second week, while cleaning the main sensor array, Sarah overheard 2 guards talking. "The readings are off the charts again," one said. "The eggheads back on Earth are going crazy over the data we're sending them." "What's so special about it?" asked the other. "Something about the way matter behaves near the event horizon. The Council's been mining these energy patterns for years, but apparently this black hole is different. The quantum signatures are unlike anything they've seen." Sarah filed this information away and continued her work. That evening, she approached Elena in the common area. "Walk with me," Sarah said quietly. They strolled toward the observations section of their block, where a smaller window looked out at the cosmic maelstrom. "You were a quantum physicist before they brought you here," Sarah said. "What do you know about black hole energy extraction?" Elena glanced around nervously. "We shouldn't talk about this. If the guards hear." "The guards are busy watching entertainment feeds from Earth. They're not paying attention to us. And I think we need to start paying attention to what's really happening here." Elena was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "The corporate council has been harvesting something they call zero-point vacuum fluctuations from black hole ergospheres for about 10 years. It's incredibly energy-dense, more powerful than fusion by several orders of magnitude. That's how they've been able to expand so rapidly across the galaxy. But the research I was doing suggested that the process was unstable. The quantum fields around black holes aren't just energy sources, they're connected to the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. Mess with them wrong, and you could cause cascade failures across light years of space. Sarah nodded slowly. And you tried to publish this research. I tried to warn people. The Council's extraction methods are getting more aggressive, and they're doing it near populated systems. One mistake could sterilize entire sectors of the galaxy. So they sent you here to shut you up. They sent me here to disappear. Elena looked out at the swirling accretion disk. But you know what's funny? This black hole, the one they're using as our prison, has some of the most unusual quantum signatures I've ever seen. If I could access the sensor data, I might be able to prove my theories. Sarah smiled grimly. What if I told you that prisoners on maintenance duty have access to the sensor arrays? Elena's eyes widened. You're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything yet. I'm just gathering information. But I think it's time we started asking ourselves a different question. Which is? They put us here because we were dangerous to their plans. But what if we could be even more dangerous from inside their prison? Over the following weeks, Sarah recruited carefully. Not everyone, she couldn't risk word getting back to the guards. But there were others like them, scientists, engineers, former military personnel who'd been in prison for asking inconvenient questions or refusing to follow immoral orders. Dr. James Park had been developing sustainable terraforming techniques before the Council decided his methods weren't profitable enough. Lieutenant Maria Santos had refused to fire on civilian protesters in the Centauri system. Engineer Bobby Chen, no relation to Sarah, despite the name, had discovered that corporate mining operations were using slave labor. Each of them brought unique skills, and more importantly, each had personal reasons to hate the system that had thrown them away. Sarah's breakthrough came during her 4th week when she was assigned to help recalibrate the main gravitational sensors. The technician supervising her, a board guard named Peterson, spent most of his time playing holographic card games on his personal device. Just run the diagnostic sequence every hour, Peterson told her. The computer does all the work. If anything looks weird, call me. Otherwise, leave me alone. Sarah nodded and got to work. But instead of just running diagnostics, she began studying the sensor readings themselves. The data was incredible real-time measurements of spacetime curvature, quantum field fluctuations, and energy patterns that defied conventional physics. More importantly, she noticed something the automated systems seemed to be missing. The energy signatures Elena had mentioned weren't random. They followed patterns, almost like a code embedded in the fabric of space itself. That night, Sarah shared her findings with the growing group of conspirators. Look at this, she said, showing them diagrams she'd sketched from memory. The quantum fluctuations around the black hole aren't chaotic. They're organized, almost like information being transmitted. Elena studied the patterns, her eyes growing wider. This is impossible. Natural quantum fields don't organize themselves like this. Unless they're not natural, said Dr. Park quietly. What if someone or something is using the black hole as a kind of quantum transmitter? That's crazy, said Bobby Chen. Who would have that kind of technology? I don't know, Sarah admitted. But I know the corporate council has been keeping secrets about their black hole research. Maybe they found more than just energy sources out here. Over the next month, Sarah's team worked to gather more data. Using their various work assignments, they pieced together a more complete picture of Charybdis Station's true purpose. It wasn't just a prison, it was a research facility studying the black hole's unusual properties. The breakthrough came when Maria Santos, who worked in the communications array, discovered that the station was transmitting vast amounts of data back to Earth on a schedule that didn't match the official supply ship visits. They're using quantum entanglement communicators, Maria reported during one of their secret meetings. The same kind the military uses for instantaneous communication across galactic distances. But the power requirements are enormous. They're drawing energy directly from the black hole itself. Elena had been studying Sarah's accumulated sensor data, and her face had grown increasingly pale. "I think I know what they're really doing here," she said finally. "The quantum patterns you've been detecting, they're not natural, but they're not artificial either. There's something in between." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "The black hole is generating quantum information at a rate that shouldn't be possible. It's like something inside the event horizon is computing, processing data on a scale that dwarfs anything we've ever built. And the corporate council isn't just harvesting energy, they're harvesting information." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They're using black holes as computers. Quantum computers operating on scales we can't even comprehend. "It's worse than that," Elena continued. "Based on these patterns, I think they've made contact with something inside the black hole. Something intelligent." The group fell silent, staring at the diagrams spread across Sarah's bunk. Finally, Bobby-chan spoke up. "So what do we do with this information? Even if we could somehow get word back to Earth, who would believe us?" Sarah stood up and walked to the small window that looked out at the cosmic maelstrom. The accretion disk pulsed and swirled, its light painting shifting patterns on the station's hull. Somewhere beyond that glowing disk, past the point where space and time broke down, something was waiting. "We don't try to get word out," she said finally. "We make contact ourselves." "That's insane," Maria protested. "How could we possibly?" "We're sitting on top of the most sophisticated quantum research facility in human space," Sarah interrupted. "We have access to sensors that can detect fluctuations in space-time itself. And thanks to Elena's expertise, we understand what we're looking at." She turned back to the group. "The corporate council thinks they've hidden us away where we can't cause any trouble. But they've actually given us front-row seats to the biggest discovery in human history. If there's intelligence inside that black hole, if there's a way to communicate with it, we're going to find it." "And then what?" Dr. Park asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since arriving at Charybdis Station, it was a genuine smile full of hope and determination. "Then we turned their prison into our weapon. They threw us into a black hole to get rid of us. But we're going to make it our throne." The next phase of their plan required more people and more resources. Sarah began recruiting more carefully, expanding their network to include prisoners with skills in computer programming, electronics, and communications. They couldn't risk including everyone. Some prisoners were broken, others might be informants, but over the course of 2 months, their group grew to 37 people. The turning point came when they recruited Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a former corporate scientist who'd worked on black hole research before being imprisoned for refusing to weaponize her discoveries. Yuki had inside knowledge of the Council's quantum entanglement systems, and she confirmed Elena's worst fears. "They call it Project Charybdis," Yuki explained during a clandestine meeting in the Waste Recycling Center. "The goal is to establish communication with what they believe are quantum intelligences that exist within black hole singularities. They think these entities might have access to information about the nature of reality itself, physics principles we haven't discovered, technologies beyond our imagination." "And they're keeping this secret because?" Sarah asked. "Because if other human governments found out, it would start a war that would tear the galaxy apart. Everyone would want access to that kind of knowledge and power." Sarah felt the final piece of the puzzle click into place. So they build prison stations around black holes to hide their research. Anyone who gets too close to the truth gets sent here to disappear. "Exactly. But there's something else," Yuki continued. "The intelligence they've been communicating with, it's not just answering their questions. It's been asking questions too. About humanity, about our civilization, about our intentions." Elena leaned forward. "What kind of questions?" "Questions about whether we can be trusted with advanced knowledge. Questions about our capacity for cooperation versus destruction. Questions about what we would do if we had access to unlimited power." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "They're being tested. That's what I think. And based on the corporate council's behavior, I don't think we're passing." That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling of the dormitory. Around her, 36 other traders slept fitfully in the red glow of the emergency lighting. Outside, the black hole continued its eternal dance, bending space and time around its invisible heart. She thought about the path that had led them all here. Each of them had been willing to sacrifice their careers, their freedom, even their lives to stand up for what they believed was right. They'd been branded as enemies of order and progress, thrown away by a system that valued profit over people. But what if that system had made a critical error? What if the very qualities that made them dangerous to the corporate council, their integrity, their willingness to ask difficult questions, their refusal to be silenced, were exactly the qualities that would make them worthy in the eyes of whatever intelligence lurked beyond the event horizon? The next morning, Sarah called together her core team, Elena, Maria, Bobby, Dr. Park, and Yuki. They met in the observation lounge during shift change, when the guards were distracted. "I've been thinking about our situation," Sarah began. "We have a unique opportunity here. The corporate council has spent years trying to prove to their black hole contacts that humanity deserves advanced knowledge. But they've been representing humanity as a corporate, hierarchical, profit-driven species. What if we could show a different side?" "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "We represent something the council fears. People who put principles above profit, who ask questions even when it's dangerous, who refuse to be silenced even when they're thrown into the darkest corner of space. What if we could make direct contact and show the intelligence in there what humanity is really capable of?" Yuki shook her head. "Even if we could establish communication, what makes you think they'd be interested in talking to prisoners?" "Because," Sarah said, looking out at the swirling accretion disk, "we're the ones who chose to be here. The council thinks they sent us into exile, but every one of us made a choice to stand up for what we believed in, knowing it would cost us everything. That's not weakness, that's strength." She turned back to the group. "The question is, are we brave enough to reach out and touch the infinite?" Over the following weeks, Sarah's team began their most ambitious project yet. Using their access to the station's systems, they started building their own quantum entanglement communicator. It was dangerous work. If the guards discovered what they were doing, the consequences would be severe. But they proceeded carefully, salvaging components during routine maintenance work and assembling their device in hidden spaces throughout the station. The technical challenges were enormous. Quantum entanglement communication required precision beyond anything they'd attempted before. The slightest miscalibration could not only fail to establish contact but could potentially destabilize the station's systems entirely. But they had advantages the corporate council didn't. They had Elena's theoretical knowledge of quantum field dynamics, Yuki's inside information about existing communication protocols, and most importantly, they had nothing left to lose. The device took shape slowly over 6 weeks. It was a patchwork creation built from salvaged sensor arrays, repurposed power cells, and quantum processors borrowed from various station systems. They hid it in a maintenance crawl space just beneath the main sensor array, where it could tap into the station's most sensitive equipment. During this time, Sarah also worked on another crucial element of their plan, a message. If they succeeded in making contact, what would they say? How do you introduce yourself to an intelligence that might be older than human civilization? She worked on various drafts, showing them to the team for feedback. The final version was simple but powerful. "We are humans who chose exile rather than silence. We seek knowledge not for profit or power, but for understanding. We come to you not as representatives of our governments or corporations, but as individuals who believe that truth and justice are worth any sacrifice. We offer ourselves not as supplicants seeking gifts, but as partners in the search for wisdom. We have been thrown into darkness, but we choose to kindle light." Finally, everything was ready. Sarah and her core team gathered in the maintenance crawl space at 0300 hours, during the quiet shift when most of the guards were asleep. The quantum communicator hummed quietly, its improvised components glowing with barely contained energy. "Last chance to back out," Sarah said quietly. "If this goes wrong, we could all be executed." Elena smiled. "If this goes right, we could change the course of human history." Sarah nodded and activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. The communicator continued its quiet humming, and the sensor readings remained steady. Sarah began to worry that their calculations had been wrong, that months of work had been wasted. Then the black hole began to sing. It started as a barely perceptible vibration in the station's hull, a rhythm that seemed to match Sarah's heartbeat. The quantum sensors went wild, registering energy patterns unlike anything they'd recorded before. Through the nearest viewport, they could see the accretion disk pulsing with new light, brilliant flashes that painted the station in colors that had no names. And then, impossibly, words began to form in their minds. Not heard, but understood directly, bypassing their ears and speaking to something deeper. Who dares to speak across the infinite dark? Sarah's heart pounded as she realized they'd succeeded. They were in contact with the intelligence within the black hole. Carefully, she activated their response protocol and sent their prepared message. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Then, new words formed in their consciousness. Curious. You are not the ones who came before. Those who seek to harvest our gifts speak of dominion and power. You speak of partnership and wisdom. Explain this contradiction. Sarah exchanged glances with her team, then carefully composed a response. We are not the same humans who contacted you before. We represent those who were cast out for refusing to accept injustice. We seek knowledge not to dominate, but to understand. Cast out? Elaborate. And so Sarah told their story. She explained how each of them had been imprisoned for standing up to the corporate council, how they'd been sent to Charybdis Station to disappear. She described their society's divisions, the gap between those who sought power and those who sought truth. The intelligence listened, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. As the conversation continued, Sarah began to understand that she was speaking with something far older and more complex than she'd imagined. This wasn't just an alien intelligence, it was a collective consciousness composed of countless minds that had somehow survived the passage through a black hole's event horizon. Fascinating, the intelligence finally said. In all our observations of developing species, we have rarely encountered individuals who choose principle over self-preservation. Your corporate council speaks truly when they claim you are dangerous, but not in the way they believe. What do you mean? Sarah asked. They fear you because you represent change, growth, evolution beyond their control. But we see something different. You represent hope, the possibility that your species might one day be ready for the responsibilities that come with cosmic awareness. The communication continued for hours. The intelligence, which called itself the synthesis, a merger of thousands of civilizations that had transcended physical existence, shared glimpses of technologies and knowledge beyond human comprehension. But more importantly, it shared wisdom about the challenges facing any species that reached for the stars. Power without wisdom is destruction, the synthesis explained. Your corporate council seeks our gifts, but they would use them to consolidate control, to freeze your species in their current pattern of inequality and exploitation. This we cannot allow. Then what can we do? Elena asked. We're prisoners. We have no power to change anything. On the contrary, the synthesis replied, and Sarah could sense something like amusement in its communication. You have been given the greatest power of all, the power to choose. And your choices have consequences that ripple across space and time. What happened next changed everything. The synthesis began sharing specific technical knowledge with Sarah's team, not weapons or tools of domination, but something far more revolutionary. They learned how to manipulate the quantum fields around black holes not to extract energy, but to create stable wormholes. They learned how to use gravitational waves as a communication medium that could reach across galactic distances instantly. Most importantly, they learned how to create self-sustaining habitats within the ergosphere of a black hole itself, places where human consciousness could exist and thrive in ways that transcended the limitations of biological existence. You're teaching us how to become like you, Sarah realized. We are teaching you possibilities, the synthesis corrected. The choice of what to become remains yours. But first, you must demonstrate that your species can move beyond its current limitations. How? By showing them a different path. Your corporate council believes they have hidden you where you can do no harm. They do not understand that they have placed you exactly where you can do the most good. Over the following weeks, Sarah's team worked with guidance from the synthesis to transform Charybdis Station. Using the new knowledge they'd gained, they began modifying the station's systems in ways that were subtle but profound. They created quantum resonance fields that could communicate across galactic distances without the corporate council's knowledge. They established energy patterns that would allow the station to separate from its orbit and navigate independently through space. Most importantly, they began preparing the other prisoners for what was to come. Not everyone was ready to accept the full truth. Some found the concept of transcendent alien intelligence too overwhelming. But many were willing to trust Sarah and her core team, especially when the changes began to make their lives measurably better. The quantum modifications improved life support efficiency, made the artificial gravity more stable, and even enhanced the station's food production systems. "Something's different," Warden Kruger said during his weekly inspection. "The prisoner productivity reports show significant improvements, and we're seeing fewer disciplinary incidents." Guard Sergeant Willis nodded. "They seem more cooperative lately. Maybe being here is finally breaking their spirits." Sarah, who was mopping the floor nearby, smiled to herself. Their spirits weren't being broken, they were being transformed. The corporate council remained unaware of the changes taking place. Their quantum entanglement communications with the synthesis continued as before, with the intelligence carefully hiding its new relationship with the prisoners. From the council's perspective, everything was proceeding normally. But behind the scenes, Sarah's team was preparing for something unprecedented. Using the modified station systems, they began broadcasting their own messages across human space. Not the official corporate communications, but something entirely different: personal accounts from the prisoners, evidence of the council's crimes, and most importantly, proof of the transcendent intelligence that existed within black holes. The messages were carefully crafted to reach sympathetic audiences: scientists who had questioned the council's research, colonial administrators who had resisted exploitation policies, military personnel who had seen the cost of corporate expansion. They didn't try to reach everyone at once. Instead, they built a network of contacts who could verify their claims and spread the word gradually. The response was electric. Within weeks, underground networks across human space were buzzing with rumors about the prisoners of Charybdis Station. Independent scientists began analyzing the quantum communication data that Sarah's team had included with their messages. Colonial governors started asking difficult questions about corporate black hole research. Even some corporate employees began to have doubts about the organization they served. The tipping point came 3 months after first contact with the synthesis. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the former colonial science administrator who had been dismissed for questioning corporate policies, managed to access one of the council's own research databases. What she found there confirmed everything Sarah's team had claimed, and worse. The corporate council wasn't just communicating with the synthesis. They were planning to use the alien knowledge to create a new form of government, one where a small elite would gain access to transcendent consciousness while the rest of humanity remained in biological servitude. They intended to become gods ruling over an enslaved species. Martinez's revelations sparked revolts across a dozen colonial systems. Corporate security forces found themselves facing not just scattered rebels, but entire populations demanding answers. The council's carefully maintained image of benevolent leadership crumbled as evidence of their true intentions spread across the galaxy. But the corporate council had one final card to play. "Attention Charybdis Station," came an emergency transmission from Earth. Sarah and her team gathered in the main communications center, where they'd taken control during the station-wide uprising that had swept through the prison the previous week. The guards were now in cells, and the prisoners had assumed control of their own destiny. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Council Chairman Harrison Vale, the most powerful human in the galaxy. His expression was cold with fury. "I know what you've done," Vale said. "You've corrupted our communications with the alien intelligence. You've spread lies and propaganda across human space. You've turned our own people against us." Sarah stepped forward. "We've told the truth. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do." Vale's smile was thin and dangerous. "The truth? Let me tell you the truth, Commander Chen. In exactly 72 hours, a corporate fleet will arrive at your location with orders to destroy Charybdis Station completely. We'll claim it was a reactor malfunction caused by gravitational stresses. Everyone will believe us after all, black holes are dangerous places. You're willing to murder 150 people to cover up your crimes? I'm willing to do whatever is necessary to protect humanity's future. The alien intelligence has knowledge that could advance our species by thousands of years, but only if it's controlled by those wise enough to use it properly. We can't allow that knowledge to fall into the hands of idealistic fools who would share it with everyone. The transmission ended, leaving the communications center in stunned silence. 72 hours, Elena said quietly. Can we modify the station's propulsion systems in time to escape? Sarah shook her head. Even with the synthesis's help, it would take weeks to make the modifications needed for independent navigation. Then what do we do? Dr. Park asked. Sarah looked around at the faces of her fellow prisoners, former prisoners. She corrected herself. They were free now, at least for the next 3 days. Free to choose their own destiny. We do what we've always done, she said finally. We make a choice based on our principles, regardless of the costs. She activated the quantum communicator. Synthesis, are you listening? We are aware of the approaching fleet, came the immediate response. We are also aware of the choice you must now make. Can you save us? Can you evacuate the station before the fleet arrives? We could. But that would solve nothing. Your corporate council would simply continue their plans, and your species would eventually face enslavement or extinction. Then what do you suggest? We suggest that you consider the full range of your options. You have learned much in our time together. Perhaps it is time to put that knowledge to use. Sarah frowned, reviewing everything the synthesis had taught them. The quantum field manipulation, the gravitational wave communication, the techniques for existing within a black hole's ergosphere. And then she understood. You're not suggesting we run, she said slowly. You're suggesting we dive deeper. The choice is yours, the synthesis replied. Asterisk, but consider, your corporate council fears the